So as we said in the last lecture, let's now actually use our API in order to update user data. And so just like before with the login functionality, we're now going to make an API call from the front end. And so we need to create a new JavaScript file for that. And this one I'm going to call update settings. And settings, because for now we will basically update the data, which is name and email, and later we will also update the password from this file. And so password together with the user data, I call them settings. All right. So this is actually pretty similar to what we did with the login. And so once more, I actually want to leave this as a challenge for you so that you can practice what you already learned. So go ahead and create an update data function here. So update data is the name of the function that I want you to create here, and then of course call that function right here from index.js. So you're going to have to export the function from here and then import it here into the index. So very similar to what we did before with the other functions. Now one important thing to do before actually writing the JavaScript is that in our form we actually need to remove these parts here. So let's actually duplicate this line here so that we leave it as a reference. All right, so let's comment out this part and add another comment here without API. And then this one here is with API. And so here we don't need the action and also not the method. All right, because if you leave it like this, then that might actually submit the data to this URL. And even if it doesn't, well, we don't need it here still. All right. So that was just one important thing. But now, please go ahead and pause the video and try to implement this on your own. So I'm sure you just did that. And so here goes the way I did it. So export const update data. And this function will receive as an input the name and the email. So the data that we want to update. And then we're going to use Axios to create the API call itself. So let's then also import Axios from the Axios module. So again, this is the ES6 module syntax and not the CommonJS module syntax that we used in Node.js. All right, so don't confuse these two. All right, so that HTTP request that we're doing with Axios will again need to be inside of a try-catch block so that in case there are any errors, we can properly handle them. So right here in the catch block. And as before, let's actually start by doing that. And in case there's something wrong, we want to show the alert just like we did in the login. So let's import that showAlert function like this from, in the same folder, alerts. All right. Oh, and we also need to again disable ESLint. And now we're good to go. So let's now use that showAlert function here. We want it to be an error so that it gets that nice red color. And then the message that we want to display is in error. So that's the error that is created in the try block when something goes wrong. Then in there, there is the response. And then in there, data.message. Okay, and so this message property is the one that we are defining on the server whenever there is an error. All right, and so we're going to try that just like we did before with the validation. So in the last lecture, we got this validation error message here. And so now in this video, when we're doing the same error with the API, we will then get the alert with this exact same message. And so that will then be a much nicer user experience because we're not leaving that page that we were on. All right. Anyway, let's now actually do that HTTP request and save that into the response. And as you already know, we need to await the promise coming from this Axios request. And so let's mark this as async. And now here, the options. So the method is a patch, okay? And you could use this here in lowercase, but I prefer to always write the HTTP methods uppercase like this. And now let's actually go to Postman to see the URL that we're going to hit now. And for some reason, this looks a bit weird, a bit too big. But never mind, I just want to select the URL that we're going to hit here. So that is here on the users, and update the current user. Okay, and so this one receives as the body only the data that we want to update. So in this case, it's the name and the role, but of course, we're not going to allow the user to update the role. And I think we just did this one here to show the example that this one is not allowed, right? And so what we are updating is, of course, the name and the email. What's important here is that for this route, we do not need to specify the user ID, as we have to do it here in update user. So this one is the first that we created, and here we needed to pass the ID as a URL parameter, but of course in update current user, we get that user ID from request.user as always. Remember that? Anyway, let's now copy this here. And then specify the URL. Okay, and so here, as always, the localhost. And of course, when we deploy this, we will then kind of change this here. But for now, of course, we're just working locally here. And so that's the one to use. Next up, we then specify the data. And so this will be the body that's going to be sent along with the request. And so the name is simply going to be the name that comes in. And then, of course, email. All right, so that's our request. And now let's test if we actually get our success back. So response.data.status, if it's equal to success. And once more, this is the status that we define in all our responses, remember. And so if this was successful, then we want to show a success alert saying data updated successfully. Give it a save, and I think that should be it for this function. All right, now all we need to do is to then use it here. So first, I'm going to import the function. Update data from update settings, and we can drop the JS there. Next up, let's actually select the form on the page. So user data form equal to document.query selector, and then let's actually take a look at that. So it's here in account. And this form has the class name of form user data. So let's grab that and put that here. Okay, and so now we will do something very similar here to this login. So if there is a user data form, well, then let's add an event listener to that. So add event listener in the case of submit. And getting access to the event here. And we will prevent the default. So we will prevent the form from being submitted with this piece of code. Then let's get the email and the name, which should be very similar to what we actually have here. So let's grab that. All right, just to make sure they are actually there, Let's open this again. And indeed, they get the ID of name and the ID of email. All right. So email is email and name with the ID of name. Okay. And then all we need to do is to really call the function that we imported. So update data with the name and email. And I think that is the correct order. So yeah, first the name and then the email. Okay. And behind the scenes, or Parcel should still be bundling all these files together on every save. So if we save this, you see that it updated now here. And so we should now be good to go with this. So let's go back to our home page here. All right. And let's try to update her data. And what I'm going to do is to basically go back to the original data, removing that middle name and the last name from here. And now save settings. And here we go. Data updated successfully. So if we now reload the page, we will then basically get that data back from the server. And so if it is the same, then that means that the data was actually persisted. So reloading, and here we go. So great, that actually worked. Let's just go to another page here and go back just to make really sure. But indeed, it did work. And now let's try out one of these errors. All right, and so that should trigger a wrong email address. And so that looks much nicer, right? So it gives us this error message, which we could, of course, format a little bit better to make it look better. Okay? But I think like this, it's perfectly fine for this small application. And we could do all kinds of stuff, like marking this field here red or something like that. But for these kinds of things, you would probably be better off using a real, fully fledged front-end framework like React or Vue. Anyway, this form is now working here, except the image, which again we're doing in the next section. And so all there's left to do is now to update the password. And so that we will do in the next video.